Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei get killed in Reincarnated as Angel Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow this xposeidonxcoolx for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. Those assholes. Here I am getting chased by a bunch of girls, for here is the edit bit. I wasn't the one peeking, it was my Mormon friends and Motohama. So basically what happened is that I was walking out of my last edit class of the day to see Mitsuda and Motohama both looking through some hole. So I called out to them asking what was up, but I guess I said it a little too loudly, because the next thing that I know I'm about to get my ass handed to me whilst Mitsuda and Motohama get a lucky break and get out the way. I soon get away from the mob of girls and go to meet up with my retarded friends. At our chosen sort of thing happened a lot, so we chose a place to meet up after one of our asses gets kicked. I sigh as I see my friends, those two were laughing their heads off. I walked up to them. The old abandoned schoolhouse looming over. I say it's abandoned, but I hear people in there all the time. Most of the time it's some guy talking about swords, or it's some girl with a super sexy voice talking about stray devils, or I guess it's just a bunch of geeks or nerds that have gone in there to play video games or some shit like that. But then again, it was better than getting labeled as a perv. Which I wasn't, it was my friends. I just got called one because I hung out with them. I sat down in the middle of them two twats and rested my back against the brick wall that surrounded the old school. I wanted to do was get a bit of peace and quiet before I had to go home and do all my course, though the universe hated me, so things rarely went my way, and that's why the sound of those bastards in the old schoolhouse rang loud and clear in my what I was hearing was two people having an argument about what would be better, to kill a stray devil with a sword or, and couldn't hear this though, as they were too busy talking about porn. When they noticed that I was no longer sitting down, they were confused. "Hey, where you going, man?" Motohama's voice said behind me as I walked to stand in front of the old schoolhouse. I didn't know what I was doing. I just remembered getting annoyed with the voices from inside the building and wanted to give them a piece of my mind, which I was about to do right now. "Hey, assholes, do you mind shutting your fatting faces about your stupid little game? Some of us want some peace and quiet." There was a moment of silence before someone in the building said RR, and then before I thought of what I was doing, I said damn. What is up with that voice? It was supposed to be a rhetorical question, but decided to answer it. I know, right? That voice alone is enough to turn anybody on. Could you imagine what the chick looks like? I jumped down from the wall and punched him right in the face. "Moron," I shouted, "can't you see that the window is open?" They could hear you. After I finished saying that, the voice giggled and the window was shut by a pair of elegant hands. I sighed in defeat, feeling like an idiot, releasing that they had heard us just as I had predicted. I grabbed my bag and started walking home before the other two invited me to another gentleman's night. I walked straight out of Academy's gate and down to the bridge, which I stopped at and rested myself against the rails. Looking down at my I heard footsteps approach me. I looked up to see a fit girl in a school uniform that I didn't had black hair, blue eyes and massive. I might not be a perv, but I'm still a guy and I noticed these things. I looked closer at her face and I noticed that she was blushing deeply. "Hello, I'm new to this place and I'm quite nervous, so could you do me the favor of walking me home? My name Raynare," she said to me. Well, at least she gets straight to the point, but she seemed nice enough, so why not? Sure, but why me?" I asked her. "Well, I saw you walking this way a couple of times, and you go to school too, so you seem like someone I could trust," she said. Well, it was a good enough answer, so I gave her a warm smile and gestured to her to come. Smiled and her eyes started to shine brightly. I ran my hand through my long brown hair as she ran up to my side. I went to take a left turn, but then she grabbed my hand. I turned around, my face hot as she continued to hold my hand. Can we go this way and go through the park?" she said and pointed in the other direction. I shrugged my shoulders. "Why not?" She smiled at me and started to lead the way, still holding my hand as if she was afraid I'd run. Did I know though, this chick had the most evilest smile on her face, the smile of a psycho. Line break. We soon arrived at the park. We walked in the entrance and the first thing I noticed was that this place was completely deserted. Raynare was still holding my hand and I was beginning to worry if she had noticed that my hands were really clammy and that she thought that I was some kind of nut job that got sweaty over all girls. As we walked deeper into the park, I noticed a water fountain up ahead, and that's when Raynare let go of my hand and ran ahead, stopping just in front of the water fountain. I slowed my pace and eventually put her hands behind her back and walked up in front of me, so close that we almost touched. "I've decided that as you were so nice to me, I'm going to give you a reward," she told me. "What sort of reward?" I said, frowning, trying not to give away to the quickening of my pulse. "Well, I have something in mind, but before I give it to you, will you do me a favor?" she said. "Sure," what it said, and then she started to grin. She reached her hand around my neck and pulled me onto her. I caught my breath as she started to whisper in my ear, "Will you die for?" asked. My expression must have been priceless. My eyes were wide and I blinked multiple times. I'm sorry what thinking that I had heard her wrong, but I hadn't. I suddenly felt a sharp and horrible pain in my stomach. I coughed, and blood spewed from my face was tight with pain, and the next thing I knew I was being pushed to the ground, the sky above looking down on me. I managed to move my hand towards my stomach, and I felt something hot and runny. I didn't have to look to know what it was. It was my bitch had stabbed me. I could feel my heartbeat slowing down and my chest started to get tight. I could only lay there pathetically wondering where the hell Raynare had gone, but then, as if to answer my question, I felt some weight sit on top of my waist. I used the rest of my energy to look down at myself, and there sitting on top of me was Raynare wearing a smile as if it were her birthday. Although she still had her smile, something was different about her. She was no longer wearing her school uniform, but instead had on what looked like something you would see a stripper wearing. Most of her skin was exposed. Not only that, but she had these massive wings, as well as a very powerful feeling about her. But wait, wings? My voice started to crow questionable. Do not worry, she said, running her hand over my face. Her voice also sounded a lot more seductive. Now that you have done me my favor, I will grant you your reward, she was telling. If you ask me, this bitch is crazy. Not only did she stab me, but now she's rambling on about giving me some reward. Well, if I die, I'm not gonna receive any reward. Now am I? That was all I could think of, wishing I could shouted in her face. The last thing I remember is a massive flash of red and blue, and then everything went dark and I started to fall into a void of blackness, wondering if I had just died. I was only minding my own business. I was just sitting there in my chair in the Occult Research Club, her orc for president and king of my peerage. I sat at the end of the room, whilst everybody else sat on the couches in the middle of the room, as if a king looking down upon his loyal. Had been a boring afternoon, and the most interesting that was happening happened to be my queen and my knight Kiba. And they had made a bet whoever done the most damage to the previous stray devil we killed would get to make the other that had done the least damage do whatever the winner wanted for a week. Apparently, though, someone else other than myself and the rest of my peerage had heard Akeno's little argument. Hey, assholes, do you mind shutting your fatting faces about your stupid little game? Some of us want some peace and quiet. The voice was a moment of silence in the clubhouse. He's human. He thinks you're talking about a mouth to and the side out rr. Damn, what is up with that voice? Said the voice. I think it was supposed to be a rhetorical question. But then another male voice answered, Eddie, no right, that voice alone is enough to turn anybody on. Could you imagine what the chick looks like? I had my mouth agape and put my hand to my mouth trying to suppress my laughter. I then heard the sound of skin on skin, so I'm guessing one boy punched the other. And Shetedmarin, can't you see that the window open? They could hear you. Then, as if to confirm and mock him, she decided to giggle. I walked over to the window, making sure only my hands were visible, then shut the window. I walked into the middle of the room. You idiots, will you keep your voices down? If a human finds out about our secret, I gestured to myself and my peerage are ed. Then the blonde twat started to laugh. I, losing my temper, go and kick him straight in the middle of his pride. Yep, that's the spot. Well, that was eventful, said, and went and sat back in my chair. Line break. It had been 10 minutes since I had heard the voice from outside. I moved over to the window, making sure to stay in the shadows. I looked outside. The coast was clear. I sighed and went to continue with whatever work I had to do when suddenly I felt a pain in my chest. Did you guys feel that? Asked myself, and my peerage nodded. And was only one reason why all of us were feeling this. There was an angel about. I have a nod of my head, indicating it was time to advance towards the back of the room. Akeno, if you would, said, standing in the middle of my team. We were in a circle ready to raise her hand, and a red glow started to embrace the magical household's transporting circle was enveloping us. Akeno started to, is because she is seriously into S&M. In case you didn't know, S&M is when you get sexual pleasure from putting someone or being in pain, and she is easily excited about these sort of. I know. I blinked, and a second later we were at the old park, not too far from school. The park would have been a beautiful and lovely place if it wasn't for the scene I was just watching. A boy about my age, they are also the same age, with brown hair, was laying in a puddle of his own blood, not to mention a gaping hole in his stomach. Poor guy, defaulted death of an angel. I might consider bringing him back as my devil servant. I took a closer look at him and noticed he was wearing a school uniform, the same as was also quite cute, but I pushed that aside and noticed for the first time the little figurine floating in the hole of his body. It sort of looked like the chess pieces we used to put someone into our peerages, but this one was different. It was a glowing gold, whereas devils were glowing red, but even though they looked different, could they be of the same use? And if so, that meant that angels had learned how to reincarnate humans. Well, shit. I made a mental note to myself that later I would have to inform my brother of this present information. I took my attention away from the boy and the figurine and looked at the other presence, which was consumed of and had long black hair with sky blue eyes full of, was wearing a what the is that a stripper's costume. I No longer understood the situation, and to go with the costume the bitch was straddling to pour, she waved her hand over the figurine, and it started to shake violently, and it started to glow much brighter, blinding my line of sight. As the light shimmered down, I looked at the boy on the ground. His wound was completely healed. The angel bitch started to laugh like a madwoman. I could feel the anger inside me bubble. It made me sick how this angel just used this boy for her own little experiment. She had really pissed me off now. Flames erupted all over my body, engulfing me in a fiery hot mass. I was ready to kill the bitch here and now, but then a blue light surrounded her and the boy, and she laughed psychotically. "You're too late, he belongs to us," said before she disappeared. Line break. I had been pondering about it for at least 3.5 hours. I just couldn't get him out of my way. He was laying in his own. His life had been taken without a second. His whole life changed before his eyes in just a matter of he was forced to live a life he didn't want. Wasn't even as if it was done out of good deed. She was just using him to get her own selfish ways. I wonder if he has woken up. Yet or how that angel bitch was going to explain to him how she had snatched away his life to see if her little project would work, or how she would have just not give a bother in the world if he had just died and it didn't work, or maybe how she was gonna tell him how he was now an angel. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the strain of having to move. I must have pushed myself earlier, even though I didn't even get to kill the little cow. But next time, if there was a next time, she won't be so lucky. I'll make her pay for the damages she has done to his soul. I removed myself from my seat and went to my room next. My father was on the school board. He managed to pull a few strings to allow me to live and have my club in the old schoolhouse. I stripped off of all my clothes and climbed into bed, pulling the sheets close to head had sunk into my pillow, and I could smell the lovely fragrance of strawberries. I turned to my side, releasing how cold, dark, silent and lonely at dark didn't really bother me, but the other three things did. I thought of this every night, but when I saw that boy, I thought I could change that by turning him into my. He would be able to keep me warm at night by hugging. It wouldn't be so silent if I could hear his breathing in the night. I knew I shouldn't be thinking this way, but everyone has wishes. Even when you're a devil, you want your wishes and hopes to come true, but mine wouldn't, because even though I don't want to admit it to myself, I know that I'll meet him again, but he will be corrupted and told how he was a devil's greatest enemy and how he needs to kill us first chance he dreams of an adorable servant were shattered. Started to move towards the blinding white light. I thought I was dead, but that's when I woke. Eyes started to flutter open, a stream of light gleaming in my eye through the crack in the curtains. I sat up, rubbing and blinking my eyes. I looked around. I was in my only meant one thing, that what I thought had just happened was just some crazy ass in this earth could have had such a realistic dream. I sighed out and fell back into my comfortable foam mattress. I turned to my side and went to grab a pillow or something, but I grabbed something completely different instead, a handful of ass. Then I mumbled to myself. I squeezed harder, and I heard a muffled high pitched from underneath the covers. I threw my covers to the end of my bed, revealing a stark and naked Raynare. Her ass, tits and the rest of her junk completely exposed before my no longer innocent eyes. I had my eyes wide and my mouth agape, because shit like this doesn't happen every other. I noticed something. I was naked too. I started to mumble things to myself like one of those insane people you sometimes see walking up the road throwing their arms in the air. I'm naked, she's naked, the what's happening, did we do it, wait, if she's here then that means that I hadn't been dreaming. Realization hit me straight in the face with a baseball. Breath was caught in my lungs. I looked down upon the naked Raynare. She way be hot and look innocent now while she was sleeping, but if my theory was right, this was the same nut job that had attempted to kill. Though I was thinking this, I still felt that something wasn't right, something was missing. The first example is that if she wanted to kill me, why was she in my two? How was I still alive? That stab wound had gone completely through me. I shook my head. This was all too much for me to handle. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, picking a pair of boxers up of the floor. As I did so, I started walking to my own personal bathroom, putting on my boxers at the same time. I walk in the bathroom, turning the tap to the sink on. I put my hands under the refreshing cold water and splashed my face, feeling instant relief flush through my body. I take a deep breath and walk over to my mirror that showed my complete body. I stood in front of the mirror and noticed something extraordinary. I had ABS, a full-on six-pack, as well as it looked as if it had a complete skin head. Cleared up, so I no longer had any spots. My skin had a darker shade, so I basically looked like a teen. Arms seemed to have swollen into a load of muscle. I also felt like I could run a marathon in a minute. I started to grin despite the situation and noticed that my teeth were also sparkling white and they were perfectly straight. I walked out of the bathroom and was given a big shock. Raynare was standing in the middle of the room, still shocked so much that I fell over straight onto my ass, making a complete fool of, giving a giggle whilst I struggled to get up with my eyes shut tight. Your tits and the rest of your junk is hanging out, Issei to her, my face reddening. I hear footsteps approaching me and gasp when I feel her breath near my ear, her seductive voice ringing out in my ear. What? Don't you like seeing me naked? I felt your present this morning. It was a hard squeeze, but I liked it and I'd like to return the favor. She started to nibble and suck on my neck, which I knew would later on turn into a hickey. She started to lower her hand from my neck down to my chest, then to my stomach, to stop at my waist, her touch making my skin tingle. She was about to reach her hand down even further before I stopped her and pushed her away. Stop it, just tell me what's happening, he ordered her. She sighed out, fine, God, you're so boring. Whatever, just get to the point. Where my voice is harder. She gave a smirk, probably enjoying being bossed about. Well, first off, I killed you. No shite, he interrupted her. I then looked at her and she was glaring at me. I made the sound of clearing my voice before telling her to go on. Anyway, I killed you with a spear of light and then I reincarnated you as an angel. Her words sounded as if she was praising herself, but wait, an angel? All of a sudden massive black wings sprouted out of her back as if she was reading and answering my thoughts. Yes, you are now an angel and so am I, but there is a difference between us. Number 1, I was born an angel whereas you were made one. Number 2, I'm a master and you are my slave. Line break. It had been about an hour and a half since I woke this morning and I had learned 2 knew I was an angel, as well as that I was some angel girls. Was now 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning and I was shitting. Might wonder why, but the reason is that if I was a slave, then that meant I had to do whatever my master told me and that would totally ruin my rep as a badass. I was also worried about the sort of things my master would make me, though I'm her servant. She didn't give me long enough to respond before she rudely left, telling me to stay where I was and that she would send someone to pick me up later. I had been patiently waiting for 20 minutes until I and anger all joined up inside me as I pulled my fist back to then throw it into. I felt pins and needles, but in my back. I didn't know what was happening, so I ran to the mirror in the bathroom. I saw massive black wings behind me. Holy shit, he tried to calm myself down and eventually the wings disappeared. I went back into my room and sat down onto my bed, sinking into the soft material. I had been thinking for a while now and decided to disobey my master's orders and thought I'd go for a walk to clear my head. I grabbed my new jacket, the ones you see jocks wear in movies, and went downstairs, putting my jacket on. As I did so, I opened the front door and went to step outside. Instead, though, as I took a step, a huge force seemed to put itself underneath my foot and throw me back inside, shutting the door at the same time. Considering the event that just occurred, I wasn't too surprised. It was something that Raynare had said that made me rely. Flashback. I need to run some errands now, so wait here, I'll send someone to get you in a bit, she had said. But wait, I started, but she had cut me off. Shut up, I don't have time for this, and once I leave, don't try to leave. I shall know if you did, and if you do try, you will be punished. She had said so with a playful look in her eye. Then a blinding light surrounded her and she was gone. End of flashback. I guess this is what she meant by knowing if I tried to. Moment I had tried to leave, that force must have signaled her, or I was shit scared of what that punishment would. Why did my life have to suck so hard? I retreated to my room to see some guy sitting there at my desk reading some porn mag. Who are you, saying, letting him know I was present. He smirked at me and said, you now angels shouldn't use such inappropriate language, by the way. I guess you're the guy to go through all the crazy shit that's happening to me. He nodded his head, telling me that I was, put his porn mag down onto my desk and stood up, putting out his hand. Tyler, angel and servant number 1 to Lady Raynare, he said. I gave his outstretched hand a look of suspicion and slowly outstretched my own hand and shook his, giving him a firm. Started to smirk evilly and of a sudden he grabbed my arm and moved at the speed of lightning. Suddenly he was behind me. He grabbed the neck of my shirt from behind and ripped my shirt off. The man, shit, I don't bend that way, he screamed at him. He rolled his eyes at me and raised his hand in the air. A metal rod appeared in his hand and at the end of that rod was a pair of wings with fire at the bottom of. I realized that he was going to press that against my back. He was going to brand, was the sort of thing that slaves got in the older periods of time. I screamed as the hot metal burned away at my skin. I continued to scream in agony even when the metal was pulled away. I looked down at my back. A pair of wings were now burned and scared into the back of my right started to form in my eyes. I attempted to pull myself together, but it was a failed attempt and I fell to my knees, silent tears streaming down my face. I took deep heavy breaths and eventually the pain subsided and I was able to stand again. I turned around to that blonde-headed prick and screamed in his face. Was that dude, at least give me a warning. His blue eyes just stared at me before he said, if I told you what I was going to do, you would have resisted. Hell yeah, I would have suddenly become dizzy as if I was going to pass out. The guy Tyler sighed, try to avoid saying the H word, otherwise you get dizzy. Devils get the same sort of thing when they curse with God in the sentence or if they try to pray or read holy words. I nodded in understanding. Of course, if there were angels there were bound to be devils too. So care to start explaining about everything? He nodded and started to give a big explanation about everything. Line break. He told me about exorcists, angels, devils, God, the big war, sacred gears, powers, the royalty downstairs, hell, ow shit, and about stray. I heard some people talking about stray devils before. No way. Yep, there are devils that go to your school. In fact, the school is run by them, Tyler said, reading my thoughts. So how am I supposed to go to school? They'll kill me, said. Tyler shook his head. They won't try anything at school. You get some glasses, but you won't be killed, not without any reason, that is. I groaned. School was as bad as it is, but now it's just taking the piss. I looked at Tyler. Why am I gonna do that? He gave me a smile. Well, I've got one idea that you could take your anger out on, he told me. My face lit up and I tilted my head to the did I know Tyler was about to take me to my deathbed. Line break. We arrived at an old abandoned building at midday. Now the dark and light balancing in the sky above. I looked at the warehouse and saw part of the roof had completely jagged bits of metal sticking. A loud roar sound from inside. The eyes started to widen and I turned to Tyler. What thought? He said, pointing to the source of the noise. That, my friend, was the sound of a stray devil, he answered me, and I didn't like the answer. I signed out. You brought me here to kill it, didn't you? Yep, he said, popping the P and sounding really perky. I really didn't like where this was going. As we entered the warehouse, a flirtatious giggle sounded from the back of the room. I squinted my eyes, and what I saw was the most depressing scene I have ever seen. And I was a woman with massive gazongas hanging out, and that was the okay part, but the next part completely ruined. The woman's bottom half was a horse. She grew long sharp teeth, and her voice was nothing like her giggle from earlier. It looks like I've got myself some nice angel pudding, she said, and started to laugh crazily. Could you tell me how I'm going to kill this thing? I said, gesturing to the stray devil. Tyler threw what he called a spear off light to me and told me to aim and throw. I nodded. My grip on the spear was tight and ready. I closed one of my eyes to aim. I was aiming for the legs, and then I would hit her in the middle to finish it off. I threw the spear, taking out two of the four. Stray devil tumbled slightly, screeching in pain. She used her arm to push herself off the ground, so she was balancing on two legs. I used my willpower to retrieve the spear, and I threw again, hitting the target once. The last time I summoned two. Spear back, concentration filling my entire body. I threw, delivering the last blow straight to the monster. Burst into light and then disappeared for good. Tyler started to clap. In bad, but for the future try not to just stand there. If it were another stray it would have already cut you up. This one was just cocky. Gee thanks, he said, totally out of breath. The whole time I had been fighting I had forgotten to breathe. We did come here to fight a stray devil, but it looks like we've got to kill some angels instead, a mysterious feminine voice said from behind us. Ara, said another. My whole body stiffened. I had heard that voice before. Knowing way, he turned around to see four others crash. Ar was a black-headed beauty. She had a blush on her face and had lightning crackling between her fingers. Even though I didn't know her, she was wearing the same uniform as I was a guy in my year at school. I called him Prince Charming because all the girls want. Other was a short girl who I also didn't know. She had short white hair and she was eating strawberry. Last was probably the most beautiful girl I would ever was around my age, with long crimson red hair, gorgeous eyes, and her tits were clearly a double D. Maybe even I could think about her. She is hot. Suddenly everybody looked at me. I grimaced. He said that out loud. Didn't I? Start to nod awkwardly. I sighed. They're all devils too, aren't they? Asked. Gave me a look before answering. Meyer. I grin at. He fail at life, admitted. Tyler was too quick for a cocky response. You fail at being an angel, he said before I punched him, pushing him to the ground. I started to rub my temples and started to talk to the devils. You have no idea how annoying this prick is. Then the redhead spoke up. I've never met such a dirty-mouthed angel. Well, you have now, princess, I said rudely. I sighed and walked towards the back of the warehouse. Were you going? Tyler's voice called from behind me. To kill myself for being, I answered him. You can't, you signed a contract, Tyler said. I spun around to face him. What contract? I asked. The brand, he answered. I didn't agree to that, you forced me, I shouted at him. I sighed through my nose and began to walk back to him. I smacked him on the back and said, you know what, I'll let you deal with these guys and I'll go home and see you tomorrow. I gestured to the devils with my head. I gave him a smile and started to imagine where I wanted to go. Earlier Tyler had told me we could teleport, so I decided to give it a try, but before I could get a clear image of where I wanted to go I lost all my concentration as there were feminine hands on my cheeks. I opened my eyes and saw one of black-haired beauty's hand on my right cheek and one of the princess's hands on my left cheek. I could feel my face had found my weak spot. Hot chicks. Tyler, help, he whispered to him, half hoping he'd hear, half hoping he wouldn't. Unfortunately or fortunately he didn't hear, and the two girls started to seduce him. Do you want to come with us? Said the redeeted princess as she started to my jaw. The other girl pushed her boobs on my chest and giggled. I made the hardest option of my life just then by pushing myself away from them and said a firm yet quivering no. Oh, the black-haired girl said, starting to blush. I narrowed my eyes at her and asked the red-headed girl what's her problem. She sighed and told me she's just really into S&M. My eyes widened at this new information. Really, that is awesome. I mean, that's end up, but it was too late. She had heard me. Whilst all this was going on with me, I didn't know it, but the other three were just standing there watching, even though I thought they were fighting the whole time. Instead, the two devils were standing there awkwardly, and Tyler the ass was laughing his head. All of a sudden a circle appeared, and I recognized it as a transporting was clearly supposed to abduct. When I noticed it, I tried to break the other two devils blocked me from getting. Finally snapped out of his laughing fit and ran over to help. As I was about to be teleported, Tyler grabbed my arm and pulled me free. No, the redhead shouted and attempted to grab me, but she was too late, and the weird thing was she didn't look angry, she looked sad. I was leaving her. Line break. I got home later on, and I pulled my key out of my pocket. I slid the key into the red door slot and opened the door. I managed to pull the key out the door and shut it with my foot before I was grabbed and pulled upstairs at a fast speed. I was thrown into a wall, and then into my room, and eventually to the floor. I groaned and touched my throbbing lip and saw that it had started to bleed. I looked up from my hand and saw a mega pissed Raynare standing before me in her stripper-like outfit. Hi. I said awkwardly. She started to shout at me straight away. You disobeyed my order, she started. You tried to leave without my permission, and then when you went off with Tyler, you decided to get fancy with a couple of devil sluts. Boo. I tried to speak, but she slapped me hard in the cheek and started to throb, and I knew there was a welt I thought was the same Raynare from this morning. I bowed my head and then continued to lecture me. From this point forward you will be punished until Monday morning, where you will then go to school. Understood, said. I nodded, wondering what my punishment might be, and then I found chains appeared from chains, secured my ankles and wrists, and pulled, elevating me into the air, so I was in a star, ripped my shirt off, and made a whip appear in her hand. Oh shit. This is a whip of darkness. Do you know what that means, she asked. I shook my head. Of course you wouldn't. A whip of darkness is like a spear of light, but light is used against devils whereas darkness objects are used against angels. I can use this because I have gloves for protection. You however are vulnerable, she said, and with a psychotic glint in her eye, she whipped the whip and the connection was made. It was like being boiled in acid inside of a. Kept on repeating her actions, taking turns to hit my back, and then while she also got a knuckle duster of darkness and started to punch me with it in the pain so terrible I couldn't even cry out. And it was only Saturday though. I had this until Monday morning. Things were gonna get a lot worse. Rias Pav. I had woken up this morning to a horrible dream. I wiped my forehead, noticing I had a slight cold. Was now Monday, and I still had the events of Saturday replaying in my thoughts during the day and in my dreams at night. I got out of bed and entered the lukewarm water, sprayed my face. I repeated my actions from the past day and started to think about him. My hand started to shake as I started to cry, my tears blending in with the water running down my face. I don't know why I cry, especially for an angel. I just seemed to think that fate got mixed up and that the boy was supposed to be a devil. A tingling sensation ran down my skin as I thought of Saturday and how the new angel had said I was, as I recall, hot, and how I had to try my hardest not to blush. I started to smile to myself and got out of the shower. I got my school uniform on and dried my crimson red hair. I stepped out of my room and sat down in my usual seat waiting for the others to arrive. I waited for 20 minutes in the chair before I heaved out a sigh and went and opened the window. The cold breeze hit me in the face as I opened the were rustling. The fallen October leaves began to move in a circular motion. The wind was whistling and the dark rain started to splashing my face. I smiled as I saw other students run away from the rain with their bags held above their. Many people disliked the rain. I quite liked it, so I grabbed an umbrella and exited the clubhouse. I started to walk around the unusually empty grounds of rain and became fiercer and started to fall. More sound of raindrops hitting my umbrella made me feel slightly sleepy. I looked up at the gray storm clouds and they showed no signal of clearing away, which made me feel slightly better for some reason. As I continued to walk around, I suddenly came to a stop at the front. There, leaning against the wall and panting heavily, was a tall figure. His posture told me that he was wearing a hoodie and had the hood up with a baseball cap on. Underneath the hood the cap was pulled down low, preventing me from seeing his. Stood up from the wall and started to limp forward until he fell to the wet, dirty ground. I walked over to him to help him up, but every step I took I got a bad vibe from the guy. Despite the bad feeling I got, I continued to approach him, my footsteps echoing around the empty school grounds. Are you okay? I asked him and put my hand on his back. As I did this he screamed out in pain. I quickly took my hand away and heard him mumble something. Damn it, princess, he whispered to himself. I don't think I was supposed to hear, but I did, and I realized who this was. I took a couple of steps back as he stood up. What are you doing here? I questioned him, my voice almost cracking. I go to school here. His voice was dark and cold. I frowned at him and stepped towards him. "Don't give me that sort of Tanae," said, sounding like a bitch, and I grabbed his hat from his head and pulled it off so he would look at me in the face, but when I saw his face, his whole face was colored in by bruises, some black, some purple with hints of skin, had a darker than unusual tint to it. When I realized it was just dried up wounds, didn't stop there, he had blood down his neck too, and hundreds of little scars on his neck and the top of his chest. I looked back at his face and saw a stitch on the top of his forehead, and that he had a swollen eye and it was shut, then lowered his head as if he was in shame. "Who did this to you?" asked him. He snatched the cap back and put it back on, pulling it low, so the shadow covered his face up again. "It's none of your business," he said. His voice was hard, yet raspy. "I don't need your pity, it's your fault this happened in the first place. Besides, your kind hate me. Why would you care?" His words were so sharp they could have cut through, though I couldn't see his face, I could feel him glaring at me. "How is this my fault?" I shouted at him. I didn't mean to be horrible, but his words had hurt me for some reason and my emotions went into my seemed surprised by the way I had spoken as I saw his body language change from being on guard to a more gentler thing. This was the same light-hearted, silly, idiotic yet funny person from Saturday, but now something had changed him. No, someone had changed him. "Just leave me alone." His voice was a lot lighter now. "Leave me alone, or she'll keep doing this to me." So I was right. Someone had been changing his ways by torturing him. In fact, it must have been the girl. Me and my peerage had seen the one that had killed him in order to change him. After all he had said, it was a she. Besides, I can sense one of your buddies watching us, so go back to wherever you came from and just stay out of my business, he said, and he was right. I hadn't noticed before, but a strong presence was nearby and watching us intently. I gave one last look at him before turning and walking away back to the clubhouse, leaving him there to struggle in the rain whilst wondering what else that Angle cow had done to. He had wounds on his back, as it would explain why he had screamed. I didn't know where else he was hurt or how severe his wounds were. Soon enough I had arrived back at the clubhouse to see my peerage was waiting for me. Seeing my sad expression, Kiba asked, "Are you okay?" He had a worried expression plastered on his face. I walked over to the window and nodded, making sure that they all couldn't see my silent tears falling down my of the concerned looks I was getting for behind me. Bekeno's Pav. I had arrived at the club 5 minutes after Rias had gone for her walk around the school. Did this a lot when it was raining, especially when she had a lot on her mind. I blame myself for her emotions going on the wild. I was the one who had suggested that we should go to kill the stray devil to get the boy that had been killed out of her. We ran straight into him, and now she was even a forbidden love being taken away from. Idea gave me a sort of buzz. I'm sort of into S&M, so when these ideas pop up inside my head I get a bit excited. I was watching Rias walk about the school grounds, the October chill running down my spine and the rain jumping onto my face when suddenly she stopped and ran over to somebody. I moved to the side to get a better look, and then I saw some guy scream as Rias touched his back. I sort of cringed as the horrible sound echoed and shimmered down my skin. I continued to watch even though I was unaware of what was happening and who the guy was for about 5 minutes and had finally arrived, and I left my position from the window to go talk with the others. We sang. The other two looked at me and asked, "What is it?" Told them. Kaneko's quiet little voice spoke up, "What about Rias?" I sighed out, "I think Rias is in love." The other two were so surprised that Kiba dropped his beloved sword and Kaneko dropped her beloved sweets. "You're kidding me." "With who?" Kiba asked. "With an angel boy," he told him. "But that's impossible, she doesn't even know him, and he's an angel." "I know, believe what you want to believe, but for some reason I just get the feeling those two are gonna have a story to tell in the future." "Okay, either you're dead serious or this S&M-ish has been taken to a whole different level," said. I rolled my eyes. They always had to blame stuff on S&M, how rude. I concentrated on my super hearing to see where Rias was, and I was surprised when I noticed that she was right outside. Rias is an outside act. Naturally alerted, nodded and started to do their usual thing, trying to look busy. Rias then walked in with a very sad look on her, looked up from his sword and asked, "Are you okay?" She walked over to the window and then the other two were completely aware that she really wasn't and that she was probably acting brave to make herself seem as if nothing was wrong. I gave the others a look and they understood me that whatever was happening to Rias, we were going to have to be there for her no matter what. I decided to clear the silence. "Oh Rias, where did you go on your adventures today?" he asked. She had a blank voice. Nore knew she was lying, so I pushed it a little further. "Meet anybody in particular?" he asked her. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "It was you, wasn't it, the one that was watching us?" "So you did meet someone, who was it?" I asked. Her words caught me off guard, so that meant that the boy from this morning was the angel boy. "What's he doing here?" Kiba's face was hard, as if he was ready to go kill the guy. "He goes to school here, we just never knew because he used to be a human." Her voice was getting quieter the more we talked about him. "What happened when you saw him?" he asked. He looked horrible. He had bruises of every color on his face, and cuts and scars as well as stitches and a swollen eye, and that's all I could see. But he has more wounds. He gave it away when he screamed when I went to help him. She turned around. She had tears in her eyes, and even more dry ones on her cheeks. That cow, that turned him into an angel, is torturing him to do what she wants, and I'm not gonna wait for that to happen. God, what was that girl? She tries kidnapping me, then she attempts to help me, and now she's pissed at me because I told her to leave me alone. I mean, why would she try to be nice to me if we were natural rivals? I think it might just be hormones or mood swings, or maybe she was on her period. Did devils get periods? I was sat in class at the back of the room watching the rain pound against the window. I didn't dare move in my chair from the position I was in, otherwise I would be greeted by intense pain spreading all over my body, as if it ran through my veins and exploded wherever it passed. Days had been. The techniques had gotten more and more advanced, as she had been torturing had started off with a whip hand, then a knuckle duster to change her weapon to something horrible and hit me in even worse places. I was minding my own business when Pervert 1 and Pervert 2 came over to revoke me. So what did you do this weekend? Didn't hear from you. I sent you text about you. No. Motohama leaned in closer and whispered in my ear. A gentleman's Gatharingi rolled my eye, making sure not to move the rest of my body other than my mouth and the one eye that wasn't swollen shut. I was busy doing stuff, he told them, mumbling the last part. What sort of stuff you mean? Like thinking of huge? Asked me, his cheeks rising at the thought of I sighed at the two perverts, and suddenly I got an idea. I took a deep breath and braced myself as I turned my head to face the other two. No, I wasn't, but you two know every girl in this school, though, right? I asked them, hoping that they may have some information on Little Miss Princess. Yeah, sure. Would you ask? Motohama said, as if it was obvious that he was a mega stalker. I need a favor to ask. Okay, what is it? I breathed out, preparing for the answer I would get, and asked, okay, do you by any chance know a girl in our school with long crimson red hair, blue eyes, huge, and she's about our age? Motohama slammed his palms down onto my desk, making me jump and causing me to shout and whisper, to have a look in his eye, as if he'd gone to porn heaven. Of course I know who it is. There is only one super hot retard chick in our school. He said this with so much pride in his voice. She goes by the name Rias. She has the biggest in school. She's the president of the occult research club. Her father is on the school board. 3 numbers are 160 58. She's in class 3A. She's the school idol. She's single, and of course she's in every guy's wet dream. I nodded to that's what Princess's name was. Didn't matter as much as her last name had told me that the household were very powerful, and if her last name was that meant she was a pure-blooded royal. Had told me that the overlord of the underworld had a sister, so I guessed that was her, which meant that she really was sort of like a princess. What about a girl with a black ponytail and emerald purple eyes? He asked, remembering not to mention this time or he might go off course. If you're talking about who I think you are, then that she is Ria's best friend. She's the vice president of the ORC. She's also in class 3A, as well as the second biggest idol in school. Her numbers are 99 59 58, he told me. I think Tyler had mentioned to her that she was a priestess of thunder, or that Mitsuda walked out with Motohama. Hey, where are you going? He named them after them. Mitsuda turned around and lifted his thumb up to me. I only meant one thing when he was done. Was now at the gym, and they were going to perv on the girls while they were getting changed. I gave a sigh. Meet you at the usual place, right? Yep, he said in sync. Should I bring extra bandages? He called as they started to leave. Yep, he said once again in sync. Line break. I had taken my time to get to the usual meeting point, leaning against walls and trees, for I finally got to my destination. I noticed that the other two weren't there, which meant they hadn't been caught yet, or they were being beaten, and couldn't move. I threw my bag to the ground which held the bandages, thinking that I may have to use them for myself. I was panting deeply and had rested myself against a couple of minutes of rest. I realized a strong presence was close. I could almost feel the devil bastard's glare bore into my skull. I looked around, but I couldn't see. I realized something. The presence was coming from inside the old club. Had been talking about stray devils, and I had thought that they were only talking about some game, but things had changed now. I looked up at the presence was defiantly inside, but it was too strong to be just one. Must be a peerage up there. I looked at the window and saw a flash of it was her. This must be her secret hide, must be allowed in there as her dad's on the school board. I was suddenly curious of what might be happening. I got up from my sitting position and did my best to sneak over to the entrance. I tried the door to find surprisingly that it was open, but it decided to squeak. I pinched my face tight into a grimace. I waited but heard nothing. I continued into the building and went up. The whole building was very dark, except for a couple of little lights shimmering underneath a door which I assumed was the room where the devils were gathered. I stepped towards the door and pressed my ear against it, listening intently. So what are we going to do about? Voice whispered. Well, we have to get him to come here first, another voice said. And how do you suppose we do that? Said a third voice. I got an idea, how about we chase the angel runt into the woods where he'll run into one of our traps, and then we abduct him and tie him up in the infirmary, and he'll be forced to stay with us. There was something different about this, sounded male, and he was at most. I then realized that they were talking about me, which made me listen even more. Than was a moment of silence before a voice spoke up. We'll leave that to plan. They were actually considering that plan. Okay, what about plan A and plan B then? Yeah, that's what I wanna know. Plan A is to just ask him to come with us, and if that doesn't work then plan B is to seduce him into submission and then abduct him. He was having a hard time deciding whether I liked plan or plan B better here. I then realized that if Rias was in there then that meant that the other voices were coming from her peerage. The others, from when I killed the stray, meant there were only 4 of them. You know, we could always just kill him. It was the male voice again, so I guessed it was the prick. Never did like him. No, that is out of the question, the voice said. I then heard footsteps heading over to the back of the room and tried to hear complete silence inside the room. I felt a drop of sweat trickle down the side of my face from being so quiet and still for too long. He's gone, a voice said. What do you mean? I saw him from out the window just a second ago, and now he's nowhere to be seen. Shit, they had seen me from the beginning. I slowly took a step backwards when a board cracked underneath my cliché. This was just like a movie. I could just see all of them turn their heads to my direction. Go get him now, I heard one of them shout to the others. I also heard footsteps approaching me. I ran to the stairs and shouted, what happened to plan? I got all the way down the stairs and was about to leave when suddenly a massive bolt of lightning hit and smeared the wooden floor in front of me. I pushed myself to a halt, jogging my body, which led to me screaming out, partly in pain, partly from shock. I fell to the floor, my wounds and injuries blazing in a fire of line of vision started to blur, and all I could see was 3 pairs of legs surrounding me. I looked at the sunlight that managed to reach inside the building from the front door. I used my hand to turn myself to the door, and I reached my arm out and pulled myself towards the light of freedom. I could feel my eyes start to give in to the sleepy feeling I had resting against, lungs rattled like a box of rocks. I pulled myself once more when I felt someone kick me hard, hit the ribs. I screamed out. It was the loudest I had screamed these past few hours. I coughed up blood, and I was taking deep shallow breaths. I was so close to freedom yet so far. My head lolled to the side and hit the floor. A silent tear ran down my sunlight that invaded the dark building allowed me to see the tiny specks of dust that floated around in the air. I looked at my blood on the floor and thought whether this would just be the beginning of the blood I was going to spill. I don't know why, but even though the situation I was in, I started to smile and gave a small chuckle, thinking that maybe they would put an end to my life and put me out of my misery. Why did my life have to suck so hard? Were the last thoughts I had before I was dragged over someone's shoulder and I passed out. Hey asshole, wake up, a deep voice said in my eye went insane. I mean, I could understand why considering the past events, but why now? Maybe I got hit in the head or something. You're not insane, you little shit, but you need to wake up before it's too late. This voice had a lot of nerve, thinking it had the right to tell me what to do, but even so I was curious. Who are you? He called out. I wasn't awake, but I guess this was like a dream or my subconscious. That doesn't matter right now, just listen to me. The angels are not your friends, they will use you to use your sack. Suddenly, the voice was cut off when I started to wake up. I was awake, but I kept my eyes shut as I remembered what devils had caught me listening to their convocation, and then they had damaged my body even further than it already had been, and I had passed whatever reason they had wanted me to talk to them, or whatever. I also noticed that they weren't nice enough to end my life for me. I took my mind off of that for a second and thought back to what the voice had. Angels weren't my friends, they were using me for what. I tried to think of what he meant when I was suddenly smacked. Literally some bitch had slapped me right in my face. My eyes shot wide open, and I screamed in the bitch's face. That was that for your little ass. You hadn't intended for it to sound so weird, but I did get a reaction. I wasn't one that had slapped. My started blush and giggle. If I remembered correctly, this girl's name was Akeno, the one who was into S&M, which explained why she was giggling, and well as giggling and blushing, she was also sitting on top of me, which took the situation to a whole different level of awkwardness. I went to push her off of me, but when I did my arms wouldn't move. I looked up and realized that my ankles and wrists were cuffed to a metal frame of the bed I was laying on. I looked around me and saw rails on the ceiling that had white curtains connected to floor was a shining white marble. I couldn't see much of anything else as I was tied down, and the white curtain had blocked me from seeing anything else. For some reason I had a serious deja vu of being tied up and waking up to a fever. I couldn't make a physical movement. I tried a verbal one instead. What do you want? I asked with a hard expression on my face. I made sure I was also glaring at her to try and intimidate her, but I don't think it worked. She gave another one of her cute little giggles and started to walk her fingers down from my chest to my waist. I definitely had deja vu. Don't worry, all your answers will be answered soon enough. In fact, we have some questions for you too. So you had to kidnap me? I asked her in a scary tone. Ah, come on, I thought angels were supposed to be nice, she said to me in a way you would talk to a baby or a dog. Yeah, I thought that too, so I guess we were both wrong, he mumbled under my breath. She sighed out and said, well, I guess I should go get the president and tell her you've woken up, and just like that she got up and left, but not before she ran her hand down my stomach and said, don't worry cutie, I'll be back, and then she gave me a wink. I could feel my face heat up as I blushed uncontrollably and my jaw hit the ground. I hadn't meant for it, but this chick got me seriously excited. I had been waiting in complete silence for at least 10 minutes now, and I was getting seriously pissed off. I growled in frustration and shouted out, hey mothers, I'm bored and I've got a itch, so hurry the up and get your lazy asses. And I said this, I realized that by saying that they would probably make me wait longer. However, after I said that, instead of making me wait longer, she came straight away, and when I say she I mean walked in from behind the curtain with her crimson red hair flowing behind her. I put on a fake smile and said, why hello princess, fancy seeing you here. She gave me a look that said shut up. Issei gave a chuckle, but I think it was the wrong thing to do at this particular moment because she slapped me hard. I looked at her and I could have sworn that she had tears in her eyes. I pushed that aside though and asked, what you want? To ask you some questions, she said flatly. No shit, I've been told, but fee I ain't telling you shit. She raised her eyebrow at me and said, is that so? I nodded and gave her a look that said pretty much. She squinted her eyes at me and then said, do you have any idea who I am? Yes, actually you're Rias, the most popular girl in school, you're head of a cult research club, you're a devil, your father's on the school board, you're in class 3A, your 3 numbers are 160 58, and of course, the sister to the overlord of the underworld, he said, remembering what Motohama had told me. She looked pretty embarrassed when mentioned her 3 numbers. So you do know who I am? No shit, I said rudely. Well, you should also know then that I show no mercy to my enemies, she told me. I was afraid you might say something like that, he mumbled. Right, anyway, back to the point, what you gonna do to me if I don't answer your questions, I asked her. She gave me an evil smirk and said, you'll find out if you don't answer. You do know that if I do answer your questions then I'll just get to where I started, but quickly stopped. If they found out I'd been tortured they'd use that against me, but it was too late, half the words were already out my mouth. You'll be what? Tortured, did you say? She said with a hint of concern in her voice. I looked away to the other side of the room, trying not to look into her eyes, otherwise I knew I'd give in. You were tortured, aren't you? She said sadly, and that's what made me look. It actually sounded as if she was sad about me being tortured, but why? Why are you sad? I thought I was your enemy, asked her if my voice is slightly softer now. It doesn't matter, angel, devil or human, nobody deserves to be tortured for no reason. That Issei listened to her. I sighed out and I knew I was taking a major risk here, but I said to her, fine, I'll answer your stupid questions. She gave me an evil grin. I think I was just tricked. Okay, first one, she said, getting straight to the point. Who tortured you? She said, looking me in the eye. I took a deep breath and said, if I get tortured again for this I'm gonna kick your devil ass. She smiled at me and nodded, so I continued, taking in another breath. Okay, it was some angel called Raynare, she's apparently my master, as she turned me into an angel. What did she torture you with? I gave her a look before answering. Well, she called them these objects of darkness. They were like spears of light, but they were used against angels, and she used a whip, a knuckle duster, a baseball bat, a knife, and an iron rod, he told her, and she had a complete dumbfounded look on her face. I whistled at her to pull her out of her trance. Last question, the other day when that other angel was with you he said something about a brand. What is it? It's a pair of angel wings that they burned into my right shoulder, he told her. There was a moment of silence passed between staring into my eyes and I was staring into her. Blue heart racing for some unknown, walked over to my bed and sat down. I need to do something to you. My eyes widened and my look just said, bitch daffik you say, and to make everything awkward, she sighed, I need to give you a full body examination. That had done it, my pulse raced faster than ever and I could feel a nosebleed coming on. Haha, funny, you're joking, right? I asked her if she shook her head though. I need you to strip down into your underwear. Why? I exclaimed. Because I need to check your wounds, she told me. I gave a smirk, and it was because you just want to see me strip. Started to blush, her face turning as red as her hair. I laughed at her face and sighed. Okay, but how am I supposed to undress if I'm tied down? He asked. She looked at me, cuffed to the bed. Oh right, she said, blushing even more. She grabbed a key from her pocket and undid the handcuffs. I stood up, slightly towering over her. I rubbed my wrists and blushed, realizing what I had agreed to do. Could you wait behind the curtain? He said, looking across the room, avoiding her gaze. Look who's shy now, she said with a smile and walked out behind the. I was free from the chain, so I had to try and escape. I looked through the gap in the curtain and saw a window across the. I had to run up to it and smash through where I would meet my freedom. I got into position and started to run, but too soon Princess had got in my way and we tripped over. I had fallen onto of her, our faces inches apart. I could feel my heartbeat speed up. We're staring into each other's eyes, but then she lifted her hand up and a small flame erupted in her hand, scaring the shit out of me. What were you trying to do, leave, she asked me. I smirked as she didn't even realize that as she was looking into my eyes a second ago that I had stolen the key to the handcuffs. I don't know about you, princess, but I think that I'm in a better position right now to make threats. I mean, what can you do from here, I asked her. These flames can get a whole lot bigger, you know, she told me. Yeah, and something else is gonna get a whole lot bigger if this position keeps on going, he mumbled under my breath, but I think she might have heard me because she blushed and pushed me off of her. She stood up and brushed her clothes down and said, just get undressed and don't attempt to leave this time. She then walked away. I sighed at her and went back to the bed and took my clothes off, wincing at the pain of my aching muscles as I removed my uniform. Yo, princess, you can come and no, we called out to her. I continued to face the bed as she saw my scars and wounds and gasped. I wasn't entirely sure how bad they were on my back, but if they were anything like the ones on my chest and stomach, then they were bad. Her delicate fingers touched my back, sending a shiver through my. Ran her hand over the brand that was scared into my. Walked around me to look at me in the eye. I, however, looked away in shame. I then felt her hand on my chin as she pulled my face and was crying, which made me gasp. Are you okay? Asked her. She nodded. Her he could ask you the same thing, he chuckled. She then walked away around the curtain, and when she returned she had some cotton balls, a bowl of water and some bandages. I groaned, oh shit, this is gonna hurt, she smiled, which made me think she might enjoy this. I then started to think about princesses in sexy nurses' uniforms for some reason. Wow, I accidentally thought of a princess. What, she said, confused. The thing, he said, quickly blushing. She frowned at me and I think she figured out what I was thinking about because when she went to wipe my wounds, she pressed really hard. Oh shit, I screamed. I looked at her and all she did was smile and say, sorry, it was an accident. Yeah, you got sarcasm on your lip, Ray said, pointing at her. After a few minutes she had finished wiping my back and I turned to her so she would do so. I turned around. I saw the once clean water, which was now filthy black, and started to wipe my chest first, which wasn't too bad, but that changed when she reached my stomach. My hands and fingers started to shake violently as she wiped over the more sensitive cuts on my body. I was biting my tongue, holding back I was holding my screams back. I couldn't help the tears then ran down my face. I had my eyes squeezed shut, waiting for the agony to end, and then it did. I slowly opened my eyes, afraid that if I opened them the pain would come back. I started to pant as the whole time my wounds were being cleaned, I had held them, then started to wrap the bandages around me, putting a light pressure on my wounds, which felt quite. Princess finished putting the badges on. I had a very sleepy feeling. It's you, Krasy said to her with a laugh and laid down on the bed, my feet still touching the floor. I had my eyes closed and asked the princess, now that I answered your questions, are you going to let me go? There was a moment of silence before I opened my was directly above me, her face centimeters away from. Started to lower her face to mine. I looked into her eyes, then to her, and then back to her. Moment I thought we were gonna. She grabbed the handcuffs and locked me to the bed again. I have no intentions of letting you go, she told me as she locked my feet up. I went along with an act as I already had. You're just gonna leave me here to rot, for Viri shouted, pulling at the handcuffs. It all looked so realistic. Not forever, only until me and my peerage kill that angel, she told me. But what about me, I asked. I'm an angel too. That's true, but she has always been an angel, whereas you were once human, plus you have not committed any evil, she said, and walked away. I pulled on my chain some more and shouted, come back, even though I know she wouldn't. I then waited for a couple of seconds before undoing the handcuffs and getting dressed. I almost felt guilty for leaving, but I was more scared if Raynare found out that I had told the devils what had happened, so I was cautious of leaving. I managed all the way down the stairs without getting caught before I stopped. I looked back up the stairs, wondering if I should just stay. I had a mental debate with myself before deciding. I walked back up the stairs and went to the doors, which I had heard a convocation about me not too long. Door was open a crack, so I took a peek. Was there, except for Princess, who was sitting in a chair at the other end of the room, facing the other way. I smirked at myself and realized this would be a perfect time to pull a prank. I crept inside, making sure not to make a single sound. I was surprised that her powers hadn't noted her that I was here, yet god devils her original plan was to scare the shit out of her, but without even realizing it this plan was gonna go downhill fast. I managed to get right up against her, was still facing the wall in front of us. I crouched down and went and sat in the leg space of the desk. I took silent breaths. I was also fighting the urge to laugh out. Princess twirled around and her legs were inches away from touching me. My jaw hit the ground as I could see straight up her was wearing lacy black panties, which gave me a nosebleed. I put my hand to my nose. I could feel blood trickle through my fingers. I couldn't stop myself from just this kept up any longer. I was gonna have a major problem. Fortunately she turned around again and I gave a sigh of relief. I got up from the desk, so I was now directly behind her. I reached my hands down, and all in a second I hooked my hands under her armpits and pushed her into the wall in front of us. I then ran up to her as she turned around, and I screamed in her face, "Boo, princess," then screamed like a little girl about to be thrown into a cold swimming pool. I laughed. My head princess did was stand there blushing and taking deep breaths. I had unknowingly took hold of her wrists and pushed myself against her, as I had trapped her by laughing with my head against the wall. I pulled myself away from the wall, my face probably red and flushed. I was looking princess in the face, finally realizing what position I was in. I was leaning into princess, my hands on her wrists and her wrists against the wall. She was practically trapped, and I was looking down at her. I smirked to myself as I saw her blushing. I then remembered how devils did these things called rating game, which is basically a life-sized version of grin, grew at the idea that formed in my incredibly stupid idea. I leaned my head forward and whispered into princess's shivered, which made me chuckle slightly. I pulled away from her ear, and that's when I lost it. I couldn't control myself. I couldn't stop what I was about to do. I at her. I half expected her to beat the shit out of me, and half expected her to go inferno on my ass, though she didn't punch or push me away, but what surprised me most is that she had me back. I could feel her push and move with mine. I could then feel her tongue enter my mouth and explore. I then grabbed her ass and lifted her up, stilling wrapped her legs around my waist and beginning me more aggressively. I could feel her hands pull at my hair, so I decided to squeeze her ass cheek, which made her break apart for a second to catch breaths, both of us panting. Then she started to my neck and started to give me a hickey. I then decided to give her one too. I started to walk backwards until the back of my legs hit her chair, and I fell into stop giving each other hickeys and resumed. I ran my hands up her shirt and held her small figure in my hands whilst she gripped onto my neck. I think I'm getting too excited though, because the next thing I know is that my wings break free from my body. I open my eyes and look at my wings. I smirk into the and princess opens her eyes too to see what, so grins herself before letting her own wings out. I hold on tight to princess before pushing myself off the chair and fly across the room with her in my arms. I then smash into the wall, slightly making this event a bit more. Legs were still wrapped around me as she was pushed up against the wall in mid, bit my bottom lip and then said, "If that's how you wanna play." I grinned and told her, "Bring it on, princess." She unwrapped her legs and pushed off the flew down and dropped me onto the desk and landed on top of whipped her crimson hair behind her as she straddled me. Yo, you know that flustered look is really doing something for me, told her. "Yeah, same here," she said to me. I gave a chuckle and gripped the collar of her shirt and pulled her back down to me. I then ran my hand up her shirt and squeezed her, gave of pleasure and deepened the dot. Then I hear someone say, "Knowing way." Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow this xposeidonxcoolx for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.